Well, good morning, everybody. Always a good sign when you're talking about permitting before 9 a.m. That's been my experience, right? My name is Andreas Rodenberg. I'm one of the founders of Pulley. We help project teams break ground faster with a modern platform for permitting. But I actually started my career in construction, and I developed a very healthy amount of respect for what you all do because it's extremely challenging. And one of the reasons I think it's especially challenging is because of permitting. Some of the most difficult scenarios that I encountered during my time in the industry were as a result of permitting, inspections, the closeout process. And to be honest with you, I was so stressed after leaving my last job in the industry that I went to therapy for a year. And I'm guessing that there are at least 3 other people in this room who have been driven to therapy right now as a result of the industry. So if I learned anything during my brief stint in therapy, it's that sometimes to get past a problem, you've got to go back to the beginning and retrace your steps. And so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to explore what went wrong with permitting and how to fix it. Now, a lot of things have gotten better over the last 70 years, but construction is not really one of them. In fact, whereas overall labor productivity in the United States has increased by about 300% over the last 50 years. Construction sector productivity has actually declined by 6%. But that's a rounding error compared to permitting, which has gotten 400% slower over the same time horizon. That ground-up bank branch in Newton, Massachusetts, my hometown, that took 4 months to build probably took about 16 months to permit and entitle. And the decline in construction productivity cost you about a week relative to 1950. Well, permitting has added a full year to your critical path over that same time horizon. How did we end up in a world where it takes 4 times longer to get a permit than to build a building? Well, the story starts almost 4,000 years ago in ancient Babylon. Some of you may remember Hammurabi's code from probably about 7th grade, right? It's where we get the phrase an eye for an eye. It's also the source of the world's first building code. Now, there were no permits in ancient Babylon, but there were very clear rules and guidelines for building stuff. And if an architect or a master builder didn't follow those rules and the construction turned out to be defective, they were legally and financially responsible. They had to use their own silver to fix it. During the Middle Ages, we took a different approach to regulating the built environment. Trade associations called guilds weren't just responsible for training craftsmen, they were also responsible for inspecting their work. You'd have one engineer looking at another engineer's work, and this is how we built some of the most beloved structures in the world today, things like the Duomo in Florence. But permitting as we know it today, where a project team is going to a local jurisdiction and getting a little piece of paper so that they can build a building, dates to the late 19th century. And around this time, cities were changing. There was huge, massive migration into cities. They were getting crowded and dense. New utilities were being deployed on the streets like gas and electricity. But the building stock was really old. In fact, if you walk down the street in Philadelphia, most of what you would see was timber-clad buildings with tar shingle roofs. And that turned out to be a very dangerous combination. In 1871, there were 25 major urban fires. The Great Fire of Chicago, a third of the city burned to the ground. And in Boston, the city's newly installed gas lines were accidentally ignited. It got so bad that the mayor of Boston deputized private citizens to go around with gunpowder, blowing up buildings near the fire to try to create a fire corridor and slow its spread. Needless to say, business owners were extremely upset, and they petitioned local governments to do something about this. That's right, we literally asked for permitting. And so jurisdictions set up buildings departments within the fire department to ensure that buildings were capable of withstanding the threat of fire at a pretty marginal cost. Probably took just a couple days to get a permit around 1900. So seems like a pretty good system. What went wrong? The short answer is that this natural process of a new challenge cropping up in the built environment and regulators responding repeated itself. We kept on adding regulation. And it turns out that this is in part because human beings have a cognitive bias towards addition. We are more likely to value our colleague who comes up with some great new idea than we are to value the contribution of a colleague who keeps us from doing something stupid. A couple of psychologists have actually studied this, and if you ask people to make a pattern out of Lego, 80% of people will add 2 blocks rather than taking 1 away. So the connection to permitting is fairly obvious. Again, we have continuously added more regulation. We've created 19,000 jurisdictions, each of which has an average of about 20 permits. And as the number of permits has increased, so too has the size of submittals. So around 1950, you probably submitted about 10 sheets to build a ground-up structure. It's probably 10 times higher today or more. If anyone is curious why you're often going through multiple rounds of comments on a permit, imagine submitting a novel for publication without any typos. Frustratingly, the only thing that has not actually increased in this whole permitting process is the supply of qualified reviewers in city governments. In fact, there are probably fewer now than there were before the pandemic. And so as a result of that, the review times, I think, I don't have to tell you, how long do you all wait for a review? 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 4 months? All of this together is why it takes so long to get a permit. More permits, more sheets in a submittal, and more jurisdictions taking longer to review them. So where do we go from here? How can we fix this? The obvious place to look is for things that cities could do differently. There are all of these exciting new regulatory improvements that have been proposed in the last 10 years or so. Things like private plan review here in the state of Florida, or self-certification in New York City. Well, I hate to break it to you, but these ideas are somewhere between 1,000 and 4,000 years old, and we talked about them about 3 minutes ago. It's really not hard to think about how to design a great system for permitting. What's hard is to convince 19,000 local jurisdictions in the US to adopt them. Could be kind of a long wait. So today, I want to explore the problem from a different perspective. I want to look at what project teams could do differently in order to actually drive better outcomes. And I want to focus on some of the changes that occurred around the time of the pandemic, when buildings departments made this switch to a more digital-driven submittal process instead of doing things on paper and in person. Because this was very disruptive in the short term, but I think it also opened the door to new solutions. And we think about Pulley as one of those. We describe Pulley as a modern platform for permitting. There are 4 key elements of our solution. The backbone of Pulley is powerful software that helps project teams collaborate around every single step in the process of preparing and making submittals across the country. But we actually connect Pulley directly to those city building permit portals so that you can see the status of information in real time. And we have not forgotten that people are still the biggest strategic advantage that we all have. We have built a team of highly technical project leads. These are licensed architects and engineers that work full-time for Pulley around the country, that we augment with a network of more than 300 former city building officials, all on your side, all available on demand. So let's take a quick look at how we can use the different elements of our solution to actually drive better permitting outcomes and address some of these root causes of permitting pain. And it all starts with getting the requirements right. That's the foundation of every successful permitting process. So at Pulley, we've been able to help our customers get the requirements right on the first submittal about 96% of the time. And we do it by learning from experience. So today we have about $4.5 billion of projects getting permitted on Pulley across 1,000 jurisdictions. And every single one of those submittals we use to update a central database of local permitting requirements, because these requirements change often. And so it's a huge advantage for us to be able to basically consolidate the whole industry into one platform so that we can learn from each other's experiences. Number 2, making better submittals. If you're going to wait 4 to 6 weeks for a city staff member to complete a review, it's more important than ever to make a submittal that is actually of the highest quality. And I love this part of our solution because I think there's a broader lesson for all of us in how we combine great people and great technology. So every sheet of every submittal is reviewed by our team of local licensed architects that are there to help your project teams make better submittals. And they're flagging all sorts of different omissions and formatting things that can easily cause an intake rejection or an extra round of comments. But we also then take the output of their work and we're feeding it to AI models so that we can help to increase the speed and accuracy of these types of reviews. And I think the idea I want to share on this slide is really that there's so much discussion about AI, but AI is only as good as the people it learns from. And so we think the biggest advantage we have long-term from a technology perspective is the quality of the people and the quality of the work that we do today. And I think that's true for everybody in this room. More transparency. I think the analogy that is most frequently used to describe permitting is a black box. Well, we talked about this a little bit already, but with Pulley, we're trying to illuminate that box. And we do that by taking information out of all of these siloed city systems, these portals, and putting it into one central place in one consistent format. And it's not only going to allow us to show you exactly where your permit is at any point in time, but it helps us to get better and better at forecasting the time to approval so that you can better harmonize permitting timelines with the rest of the pre-construction process. Because it's no good having a permit if you haven't mobilized a GC on site to actually go out there and get to work. Which brings me to my last point, seamless workflow. We want to connect the work that your team is doing during the permitting process with every other element of construction because it's so interdependent. Permitting impacts the designs that are actually buildable. It impacts schedule, it impacts cost. And so we wanted to connect our platform to all the different tools that you use so that the workflow truly is seamless. Again, important when you are making so many different submittals of a very high level of complexity. So let's sum up. The problem was more permits, more sheets in a plan set, and more cities taking longer to review them. Well, it helps a lot to have the right requirements. And if you're going to be making these huge submittals, you probably should have some software to do it. There's a reason that we use software in every other aspect of construction except for permitting today. If we're going to have to submit to 19,000 different jurisdictions, it would be really helpful if you didn't have to log into 19,000 different portals. And if we're going to wait 4 weeks for a submittal, we better be extremely thoughtful about what we actually submit. My aspiration, our aspiration at Pulley is that 2025 is the first year in 100 years that permitting actually gets faster. We have no silver bullets, but we have a lot of different things that can help you to do this work better, and we would love to be a part of the project team on your next project. Thanks so much for listening, and have a great day.
Let's hear it for Andreas. Thank you, Andreas.